This is Inside the Wolf's Den, an entrepreneurial journey with Shawn and Joni Wolfswinkle.
Welcome back to Inside the Wolf's Den with your hosts, Shawn and Joni Wolfswinkle. Today we have a good friend and also a fellow Houstonian with us, guest Boris Sanchez. How are you, Boris?
Good, thank you, Joni. How are you?
Good, thanks. And thanks for joining us inside the Wolf's Den. So just a quick bio on Boris. Boris Sanchez is an accomplished and active commercial real estate investor, broker, lender, and educator. He has personally owned over 800 multifamily units and actively buys and sells commercial real estate every month. He has been a broker and a lender in over $1 billion worth of commercial real estate transaction in his 8-year career so far. Along with Sandmore Investments team, he plans on acquiring another $20 million worth of commercial real estate this year. Boris also personally mentors investors looking to enter the CRE arena, as well as experienced investors looking to expand or diversify their real estate portfolio. So again, thanks for joining us. Tell us a little about background on yourself, like how did this all get started?
Sure, I'd love to. So I've just come from an entrepreneurial background. I've owned businesses ever since I can remember. My first business ever, and I think, Joni, you know that because they had weird facts the other day when we were talking, but Daryl did say one of my favorite facts, I guess, about myself, which is that I started my first business when I was 7 years old.
Yeah.
And it was like a food delivery business, and it was great. It didn't go anywhere at all, but it was just pretty cool, and I learned a lot from that. And ever since then, I've owned, you name it, e-commerce business. I've owned what else was a car dealership, a consulting business. So yeah, it's I've been kind of bouncing around. At the same time, I have 10 years of corporate experience working for Shell Oil and AIG. And I'm glad I did that, got out of the way early, so I know what never I want to go to again.
Yeah.
It was just not for me. And so, yeah, I got that all the way. I went to London, studied, got my master's degree out there. And when I came back, I started working for my family's mortgage company.
Okay.
And I started off this was 2010. So, yeah, I started off as a mortgage broker, and I didn't like it at all. We were exiting the recession, and so the laws were changing. It was just very tumultuous, and I just didn't want to mess with the whole residential thing at all. What really intrigued me was commercial, and so I started, even though I was kind of flipping homes at the same time, I knew that wasn't the end goal. I'm glad I did that because I got to know the investor side a little bit more rather than just selling the loan products. And so I started. I got done with that. I got done with my last flip, and I was like, you know what? Let me buy a small commercial property. And yeah, that's actually another story. But I'll let you ask the next question.
No, we appreciate that.
Yeah.
No. So my question for you is, based that you kind of started off in residential and started in the lending and mortgage, but also started with flipping single family homes. Tell us some of the advantages of commercial real estate now that you have a ton of experience in educating and continuing to buy commercial real estate. Tell us the advantages of commercial real estate versus the single family or residential market.
So obviously the first and the best thing is the valuation of commercial real estate versus residential, right? I have a mentorship program that my students have endearly called the Church of Forced Appreciation, because that's all I preach about all day long. I think, forced appreciation is something that is kind of a quiet wealth maker. It really is essentially the equity that you're bringing, or the value that you're bringing to a property by raising rents and renovating and doing all that stuff, right? It can be multiplied if you actually are doing it right. And so that's not available in residential. That's, I always give the example, if you buy a $200,000 house and you rent it out for $40,000 a month, what is that house worth? $200,000.
Yeah.
It's not worth anything more. Of course, somebody's going to be, if you sell it, somebody's going to do great in the cash flow. Yes, but there should be some kind of evaluation for that, and that's not available in the residential market.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah. Do you feel that real estate investors have to start with single family first before they jump into commercial?
That's a very good question, and my answer is yes, but with a caveat. Only use it as a tool to get to know yourself and the market, the investment market. Get to know what a piece of sheetrock costs, what a day of labor costs, what framing is, how does that work? Because you're going to use that for the rest of your life.
That's so true.
And so if I also get the question, for folks that are starting out, they're young and they want to study. I'm like, look, if you want to be in real estate, there is no other way. You're going to need to know a little bit of construction management and project management, stuff like that. And so if you're going to school and going to college and all that, I always kind of like to recommend that. But yeah, so I think that's why residential is good. Not because it's going to generate wealth. It's actually very, very hard to generate wealth from residential real estate only. Most people end up pivoting to commercial real estate, earlier or later. And so I think that's the end. That should be your end goal from the beginning.
Yeah.
That's great. Is there a certain commercial asset that you prefer and focus on versus, whether it's shopping centers, industrial, apartment complexes? Is there a niche that you think is better than the other, or does it just depend on the market and the time? And
I mean, yeah, it always depends. But me as an investor, I've been kind of evolving, in the last 13 years that I've been doing this or so. I started off with multifamily because it was just very similar to residential. I still heavily believe in it because of the ease of selling an apartment to somebody. It's not like a shopping center where you kind of have to sell that space to a business, but it's very competitive because your neighbor might be selling the exact same thing. And so the availability of apartments and obviously the need for apartments is always going to be here no matter what, right? Maybe e-commerce one day will wipe out retail, maybe office as well with technology, but people will always need to live somewhere and somewhere condensed. And so apartment complexes are the way of the future. And it's virtually easy to kind of bring value to a multifamily property. Now, having said that, I have found myself playing around in the self-storage space recently and retail because I think it's kind of easier to add value and the whole thing about forced appreciation. A lot of you can add value in a lot of different ways, easier ways, cheaper ways to those properties rather than multifamily, and it's not so management intensive.
Yeah. I love that you diversified your portfolio into different asset classes. That's pretty cool. And also into lending. So maybe talk a little bit about that. I know in your bio you talked about lending, and speak of what types of investments do you look to lend on?
Sure. So we're Samurai Investments is kind of like two companies in one. And on one side, I guess we have the management of my own properties and everything like that. We're owner operators. We don't syndicate. We don't crowdfund or anything like that. That's literally what they kind of believe in, is just the ownership of 100% of every property. And that's one side. On the other side, we have the brokerage, which we sell properties, small to medium-sized commercial properties. And what's different about us in that environment is that we package deals up with the property and the loan itself. So instead of me saying, here's a 12-unit apartment complex for $600,000, you figure out how to get it. Instead, what we're saying, we're packaging it up with a hard money loan that because of the way it's structured, you can borrow up to 100% of the cost of the property, including rehab, purchase and rehab. And so that allows us to circumvent the biggest hurdle to commercial real estate, which is the down payment. And so Samurai Investments, we package deals up so that in this instance of the 12-unit complex, we're able to say, just bring us 50,000 at closing and the deal is yours. We bring you the property, the loan, the education behind it, and how to, what to do to the property to make the value jump and experience forced appreciation.
Wow. Cool.
So
That's awesome.
we package it up with the property itself. So the loan goes along with the property, and that's kind of like what we do.
Yeah.
That's very smart.
Yeah.
I didn't know, number one, I didn't know you did that or did the lending, and I didn't know, can you speak to why you don't syndicate or, I was kind of surprised to hear that. I love the idea and all that, and most people I think struggle they need the funds, right, from outside. So that's
Right.
kind of cool that you, focus on keeping it all in-house in your properties.
Yes, absolutely. So I'm a little bit of a contrarian guy. I don't believe in your typical kind of guru things. I think number one is we've fallen in love with this whole concept of how many units you own and the AUM and all this other stuff. I don't think people pay the bill. You can't pay the bills with how many units you own. Right?
You are
You can
so
only pay the
right.
bills.
Yep.
And so I think it's a false metric. And I think, just to give you an example, I guess I would rather own a fully paid off 20-unit apartment complex than a fully leveraged 100-unit apartment complex with partners that I only owe 3% of.
Yeah.
And so, but they, these two people will give you different answers when they ask you how many units you own, right?
Yeah.
20 and 100. Even though the guy with 20 units might be worth, 4 times what the guy with the 100-unit apartment complex has.
Absolutely.
And so, because of that, and I believe that these smaller properties are way easier to renovate, to build value, to add value, and they're shorter projects. In your typical syndication, you're going to have 3, 4, or 5 year kind of projects, right? In this environment right now, there's no such thing as cash flow. A lot of guys are just hanging on to their cash flow, and so their investors are only waiting for those 3 to 5 years to actually get that big payday when they sell the property. Most syndicators only make anywhere between $500,000 to $1.5 million per investment, and I believe we can do that in a way shorter time period, in less than 12 months, less than 24 months, and the smaller properties.
And you see so much of that on social.
Yeah.
And it's like, they're talking about how many doors
Units
it's like,
they have.
yeah, it's like they're all syndicated at all, and they own, some of them don't even own, they just put it together. I mean, they have the percentage of ownership is so small in the majority of those guys. And then, I think a lot of them actually can get in trouble, maybe depending on what happens over the market the next couple of years. But I agree with you 100%. So, can you talk to us a little bit about kind of the due diligence process that you use or when you're evaluating a commercial asset?
Yeah, sure. So I always look at the end result. I love to tell my students and clients, I love ugly. You present me with the ugliest property falling apart, it's leaning on one side, there's a tree growing out of it. I love it. I would rather walk that all day long than something that's already renovated, because I know what I can do with it. I like to also be creative in deals. For example, I'll turn a 4-plex into an 8-plex. In my largest complex that I own, I turned that 72-unit into a 100-unit apartment complex by splitting units, and added, like $7 million in value. I bought it for 3.6. Now it's worth 12 million. So it's creativeness in rehabbing, creativeness in structuring the deals and adding value. That's the type of due diligence that I'd like to make upfront. Of course, I don't really care that a property is completely vacant. That normally means that it's a negative cap rate, but so I don't really look at cap rate when I'm buying, because I'm looking to add so much value that it doesn't matter whether it's empty or half empty or what have you, right? Of course, if I'm buying an asset, if I'm ever buying an asset that's cash flowing, much like the 72-unit that I bought, I'll run all the metrics. I'll make sure to know how much my capital expenditures, how much money is going to go into the rehab, how much money is making now. But I think, honestly, in my contrarian ways, that's secondary to how you structure the deal and how, what the end result of the value could be.
Yeah, that's great. We talked about this earlier this year, Boris, when we were on the real estate forecast panel, but I think it's great for our listeners to hear it as well from you. So, like with interest rates rising last year and the market changes, what challenges or opportunities do you see for investors in the next year or two?
I think I've been getting told that something big is happening, something big is coming in the market. You should sell now. A very big investor in Houston told me that in 2016 that I should sell all of my properties because something big was coming. I couldn't afford to at the time. I was like, no, I'm just going to stick with it, come thick and thin. The only big thing that I remember happening the whole time was probably the oil crisis and COVID, both of which we recovered pretty quickly.
Right.
And so I think that right now you should definitely use the mentality from others, from sellers saying, oh my gosh, it's time to exit. The world, the sky is falling, like Chicken Little said. And so I really think as a buyer, you should use that as a tool. But as a seller, I think as long as you have the added value, right, and you have a very strong pro forma and due diligence for the future, that I can rent this unit for so on and so forth, worst case scenario. So very conservative due diligence and underwriting of a deal. As long as those check out, I think you're going to do just fine. And, it's like what they said, the best time to invest in real estate was 20 years ago. The next best time is today.
Yeah.
It just so happens that the market seems to be going down. It's a little bit nervous, maybe up, maybe down. I don't know. But like I always like to say, it's always a good time to buy a good deal, no matter what. You just have to know what you're doing. You can't pretend that you know what you're doing. You kind of have to be confident that you are.
Yeah. And now that you're talking about knowing what you're doing, we have a lot of listeners that maybe are just maybe trying to get started or want to get started. What advice would you give them?
The people that are getting started, you mean?
Yes.
Oh, okay. That would be, get educated, it might be a cliche, but honestly, it's the biggest asset that you could possibly ever own. Let's say that the sky does fall and everything goes as nobody can ever take. If you lose it all, if I were to lose it all tomorrow, the one thing that nobody can take away from me is the knowledge, the creativeness of how to put together a deal. Even if I just work under another investor, how do I add value to them, right?
Right.
And so I think the best way to add value to somebody else or a property or any vendor or anything like that would be to get educated first. Know how to structure a commercial deal, know how to value a commercial property, know the different kind of financial products that are behind commercial real estate. All that matters greatly. And that's something that, like I said, nobody can take away, and your biggest asset. So start building your biggest asset from the get-go. It would be my thing.
That's great.
Yeah.
So a follow-up question to that would be, if you could go back into your 20s, is there any advice you would give yourself in your early 20s?
Don't waste time.
Yeah, don't waste time.
You don't need to go to that party, Boris. So probably, even through all my kind of business ownership experience, I've failed a lot. I can't say that it's all been rosy. And so I've lost it all at several points in my life, even in my 20s. But the perseverance was always kind of there. But I would be lying to you if I said I didn't doubt myself. I absolutely doubted myself sometimes. And
Boris, I couldn't agree with you more. And Joni and I, have been in this for 23 years now, and there's numerous times that we have fallen flat on our faces, but that's part of, like you mentioned earlier, the journey and learning. And even if we were to lose it all today, it's that knowledge from failing prior and all the experience that we've gained over the years that we could rebuild it again if we need to. Of course,
100%.
Knock on wood. Nobody wants to go through that.
No.
But and I think it's.
You couldn't be either one of us could be where we're at today without those failures along the way, right?
Absolutely.
So it's kind of what made
Absolutely.
Makes us.
So yeah. Again, if I could go back in time and tell myself, like, I would tell myself, keep going, because I would get disheartened. I would be lying to you if I didn't tell you that I got disheartened, but I did. So I would definitely go back to myself and tell me, to just keep going, because it'll all make sense in the end.
Right.
And I'm glad I didn't quit. Right. I feel for the people that just, get down on their luck and they just kind of quit and do something else. I'm glad I wasn't one of them.
Yeah. So this is a question we ask a lot of our guests, and it comes from a good friend of ours, and then he was a guest on the show as well. But what's Boris Sanchez's next? What are you looking to accomplish in your next 5 to 10 years?
So next 5 to 10 years would be to grow my brokerage operation nationwide, bring that unique product, to the masses, make it easier for people to get into commercial real estate, get familiar with it, right? Eliminate and abolish that mentality that that commercial is to be left for the professionals and to people who know what they're doing. It's actually easier, simpler, and less risky to invest in commercial than it is in residential. And so, that would be my kind of goal on that end. As an investor myself, I see myself investing in my first $100 million deal in the next 2 years.
Nice.
And so in 5, would probably be 10 times that, hopefully.
Awesome.
Yeah. Well, it's truly been an honor to have you on our podcast. I don't think I've had maybe one other commercial investor on the show. So, and I know our listeners are really interested in that. And you brought a ton of value today. So we really appreciate you being on the show. But how can our listeners get a hold of you if they want to work with you?
Yeah, sure. So please do send me an email, boris@sanmore.com. Send me an email and, ask me about deals, or if you want to ask me about the mentorship that I offer or anything like that. My biggest motto is let me add value to you. So even if I can add value to you in some sort of small way, let me do it.
Awesome.
That's great.
Yeah. So we'll put all that in the show notes and your website, and so they can reach out to you. Do you have any education products that you, or any events that you have coming up this year? Or?
Yeah, so I have my next class will be March 11th, and that'll probably be for the last one for the year. I'm getting married later this year, and that's
nice. Congratulations.
Thank you. And so that's going to keep me plenty busy. So I'll probably have my best last one for the class, the class wise. I'm going to have that in March 11th.
Okay.
Awesome. So March 11th, guys, it'll be on the show notes. So check out Boris's website and email. You can email him for any information on his upcoming class. But again, Boris, thank you so much for joining us. It was a pleasure having you on.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate it, guys.
Yeah. Thank you very much. And if there's anything we can ever do for you, please let us know. But otherwise, we'll see everybody next week.
See ya, everyone.
You've been listening to Inside the Wolf's Den, an entrepreneurial journey with Shawn and Joni Wolfswinkle. Tons of entrepreneurial podcasts are out there, talking. But Joni and Shawn are living it every single day. Their portfolio now includes many franchises and medium-sized businesses. We talk about the trials and motivators of successfully running a business. Join us again soon for another podcast. But until then, reach out on the website at InsideTheWolfsDen.com, on Facebook at Inside the Wolf's Den, on Instagram at Inside the Wolf Den. We'll see you again soon. This is Inside the Wolf's Den. We'll see you next time.